If you clicked on this video for an introduction to Minecraft's most important commands, you're in the right place. We're going to be going over 15 commands and how to use them. The first is /weather, which can be used as you may have predicted to set the weather. You can set it to clear, rain, or thunder for a certain amount of time. If you don't specify how much time, it'll just stay on that weather until the game decides to change it naturally. But if I do clear for something like 1 second, it will go to clear for 1 second, so short that you can barely see it. If I go to 5, you'll see that it goes clear briefly. You can see the stars, and then it starts raining again. You can use this to set it to thunder if you need a thunderstorm, or to most often clear if you just don't want to have to deal with the rain. The next most important command is /time. This is nice for setting the time to day. If you do /time set, you can set it to any particular time you want. Day is the morning, noon is this. You can also do time add, which changes the game time by a certain number of ticks. So if I change it by 100, it'll advance the time by 100 ticks. You can do 1,000, it'll go a bit further. You can also specify if you want to change it by seconds or by days. And it doesn't move, but it's actually added 1 day to the clock. You can see that using /time query. If you use day, it'll show you the number of days since the beginning of the world. You can also do /time query daytime to show you the number of ticks since the beginning of the day, or /time query game time to see the number of ticks since the beginning of the world. Another command I like is the /locate command. You can use this to locate any structure, such as a desert temple. If I do this, it will show me where it is and gives me the option to teleport to it. I can just enter that command. And it takes a second to load, but if I go into spectator mode, it teleported me to a desert temple. I can also locate a biome. So if I specifically want to build something in the Cherry Grove biome, I can use this, teleport to it, and once it loads, I might have to fly out. You can go to the game mode selector using F3 and F4 by pressing them at the same time, and then you can just choose which one you want to go to. So now I'm in a cherry biome. You can also use /locate POI, which stands for point of interest, for a few more niche applications. So you can locate a beehive to see where that is, or you can locate where a Fletcher villager is specifically, or a fletching table, can be located, which is interesting, but not as useful in my opinion. The /Gamerule command is more useful in my opinion though. You can use it to set any Minecraft game rule without going into the settings. So for example, I can set game rule do daylight cycle to false, and this way it won't move the moon at all if I can stay still. Yes, the sky won't move, so I can do time set noon in conjunction with that, and it'll be noon forever. I can also do /gamerule do weather cycle to false, and this way it'll stay clear forever. Some other useful ones are game rule do fire tick, which if disabled will make it so that stuff won't catch fire. Do mob spawning. I set that to false already so that I wouldn't get surrounded by mobs in the nighttime. You can also look through these on your own, so like disable raids, do insomnia, do trader spawning. You can change all of those to customize your experience. /game mode is good too. You can set yourself to any of the 4 game modes: adventure mode, creative, spectator, or survival. Adventure is basically survival, but you can't break anything if you don't know. You can also use the game mode command on any player, so if you want to set your friend into survival, you can type in their username here, and I don't have anybody else in the world with me, but it would do that. There's also a selector here, which is an important concept for other commands too. You can type in @A, and that will select all players, including yourself. You can select @E, which is all entities, so all mobs, all items, item frames even, and all players. You can do @P, which is the closest player, which if you're running this by hand is yourself. If you're using a command block, it might be different. @R is a random player, and @S is yourself. This won't work if you're using a command block. Try to remember the selector, we'll be using it a lot later on. Alright, here's a fun one. /effect lets you give yourself any potion effect. So if I do /clear and then @S for myself, I can just clear all of my effects, or I can remove a specific one. So if I want to remove blindness, I can remove that, but I don't have blindness, so it gives me this error message. I can also do /give, and then myself, let's say speed, Minecraft speed, for a certain duration. You can set infinite, or you can just set it for 20 seconds, and you can set any amplifier, so speed 1 would be, I have speed 1 now for 20 seconds. If I set it to speed 255, which is the maximum, then I go flying. You can also make it so that you don't show any particles, which is useful for giving yourself invisibility, or just so that you don't see this little indicator up here that fills up your screen. The seventh command that I recommend you learn is the /teleport command, or more simply the /tp command. This takes a target, such as yourself, and teleports it to a set of coordinates. Now, I made a YouTube short of going in depth into how coordinates work, but simply they take an x, y, and a z coordinate. Your x is your position along one axis, your z coordinate is your position along another axis, and the y position is your height in the world. So in this case, I'm facing towards -x. You can see right here that when I move along this way, my x coordinate goes down. When I move this way, it goes up. And when I move this way, my z coordinate goes up. And when I move this way, it goes down. And going up and down changes my y coordinate. So I can take any set of coordinates and teleport myself to 0, 64, 0, and I'll be moved over here. And you can see this is where I am. You can also teleport to an entity. So instead of teleporting myself to 0, 0, 0, I can teleport myself to myself, which doesn't really make sense here, but if you have players, you can teleport to your friend. I can also teleport to an entity as long as I'm specifying that it can only be one entity. If I try to teleport to multiple things, that doesn't really work. After you put in your coordinates, you also have the option to put in a rotation to specify where you want to look. You can use two numbers like this to specify these numbers, which change as you look around. The easier way, in my opinion, is to just specify a block that you want to look at. For example, here I'm going to teleport to 0, 64, 0, facing 0, 0, 0, so I'll be looking straight down. If I change this to be 100, I'll be looking down towards 0, 0 still, but at a different angle. Oh, also, if you just type in /tp and then a selector, you'll teleport yourself to that selector. The /summon command is an especially fun one, in my opinion, because it lets you summon any entity to a position. In this case, I'm using tildes to specify my current x, y, and z position. So this will summon a boat to where I am, but it actually has a lot more uses than that. Like, you can summon a lightning bolt at any position, and look, I just got struck by lightning, which is fun. You can also specify the NBT data of a mob when you're summoning it. So, for example, if I'm summoning an armor stand, I can set it to show its arms, and this will make it do that. NBT data is pretty useful since it lets you change any entity, but there are also a lot of tags, so you'll want to go on the wiki to find tags for each individual one of them. I like to use NBT data to modify armor stands, so I can make one with no base plate as well. And you can combine multiple of these. If I take this and paste it into here and just combine them with a comma, now I have one with arms and no base plate, and I can decorate it however I want. The /setblock command might not be the most useful command, but it is a good introduction to some of the commands we'll be going over later. You take a set of coordinates, in this case I'm hitting tab to select the block I'm looking at, and I can set it to any block that I want. So I'll change these leaves to stone, and there we go, that sets it to stone. You can also add destroy to the end of the command to get the drops of the block. Keep to only replace it if it's an air block, which in this case it isn't. Or you can add replace to the end of the command, which is the same as without the replace, and it just fills it regardless. Building off of this is the /fill command, which takes two sets of coordinates. I can hit enter and then go up using the up arrow key, and use tab again to fill in the block that I'm looking at, and then set it to any block that I want. And I've just set that to stone. Now, just like with the setblock command, there are a few things I can add on to the end. If I want to make this air but only replace a certain block, such as stone, I can do that, and it will only replace a stone block. But if I add some other stuff and run that, it'll only replace the stone. Hollow will make a hollow box, so everything in the middle will be air. Keep preserves any blocks that are already there and just replaces the air. So if I break a bunch of these blocks and then build a few of those, I can use that to only fill in the air. Outline is the same as hollow, but it preserves the inside, so I place the grass blocks in the middle and they're still here. And lastly, destroy gives you the drops from all the blocks you fill. This is another one I made a YouTube short about. I'll link to it as well in the description. The /clone command is another useful command, building off of setblock and fill somewhat, but it can also be really confusing. If I select this block and this block at either end of this structure that I've constructed here, I can paste it here and it will clone itself, as you might expect. But as you might not expect, I selected this block and this block, but neither of those are the origin for this new one. This is because whenever you use the clone command, it always pastes towards the southeast and upwards. So I can use the facing indicator here to determine where I'm facing. This is south and this is east. So I'll know that when I paste a building, it will always paste in that direction. Just like with setblock and fill, there are some things I can add on to the end. The first is filtered, which just filters out a certain block. So if I select oak logs, it will only paste the oak logs from this selection onto here, without any of the other ones. I can also add a masked to the end, and this will paste it like normal, but it'll only paste the solid blocks and none of the air blocks. I can also add some things onto the end of masked, such as force, which will force it to clone even if the origin and destination areas overlap, or move, which will move my original here, but still mask it. And of course, normal just does the same thing as without normal. Replace is the opposite of masked. It clones everything, including the air blocks, as you would expect from a command without replace. The difference is that this gives you the option to use force, move, and normal without masking it. If I use force, it will copy it even if the areas overlap. In this case it doesn't. And move will move it while also replacing any air blocks. And just to demonstrate what it does if I don't use force, I can use this and it will deny me the cloning because the destination and origin overlap, but I can use replace force and that will do it. I can also use mask if I want to keep the block that is right here. The 12th command I'd recommend learning is the /execute command, and it is one of my, if not my, most used commands. It may seem complicated at first, but once you've used it for a while it starts to make a bit more sense. Essentially, the execute command allows you to do something based on a series of conditions. I can execute as, and then at E, type equals zombie, limit equals 1. This will select this zombie, because I only have one zombie in the world, because I've disabled mob spawning. And it'll let me execute a command as this zombie. So I can say run, and then it lets me do a normal command. So I can do say hi, and it says, the zombie says hi. You'll notice though that if I run a coordinate specific command, it will run where I'm standing and not where the zombie is standing, even though it's running the command as a zombie. So I have to type at s, which runs the command at the zombie and as the zombie instead of at myself. And then I can type run summon, say, a boat, and it'll summon a boat where the zombie is standing, or I can do a lightning bolt, and it'll strike the zombie with lightning. I can also add if to the end to specify to only execute the command if a requisite is met. So if I do block tilde tilde -1 tilde is a grass block, this will only execute my command if the zombie is standing on a grass block. So I can summon a lightning bolt if I'm standing on a grass block, but if I get a zombie in the water and run this, nothing will happen because it's not on a grass block. I don't have time to go into all of the variations of the /execute command, but there are some fun ones using bats. I can use a bat as at E, type equals bat to select every bat, and then have them run, well, I have to select at self, run summon another bat where they are. So this will summon a second bat, and then they'll just keep duplicating, and then when I'm ready, I can summon a lightning bolt at. I can also, if I get myself another original bat, use this to make them duplicate a lot, and then run setblock tilde 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 stone, and it'll make a bunch of blocks, which you can kind of parkour around, and then I have to get rid of them, so kill at S. Or you can use the lightning bolts, but it might be a bit laggy. Another use for the execute command is if you want to move an entity to a precise location, since it allows you to move the entity relative to itself instead of relative to the world. The next command you might want to know is the /data command, which is pretty complicated, but it can be useful. It deals heavily with the NBT tags we mentioned earlier. After you type in /data, you can get the NBT data of a specific entity, in this case, this armor stand, and it'll show me every single tag this entity has. You can also use the data get command on blocks like chests and furnaces, which can store data, but not on grass blocks because they can't store data. All grass blocks are the same. /data modify allows you to add or change a tag that an entity has, and it's pretty complicated, so I prefer to use data merge, which will automatically add the tag if the entity doesn't have it, or change it if it already has it. So I can select this armor stand using its ID, which if you are looking at an entity, you can press tab to fill it in, or you might have to go up and down with the arrows to do that. And then I can just select the tag I want to merge and what I want its value to be. So in this case, I'll change its small tag to 1. I can move it backwards and all that. The /data remove command lets you set any tag of an entity back to 0 or null. So in this case, if I remove its small tag, it'll restore that, but it'll still have that tag. It's just set to 0. You can find more in-depth guides on the /data command online, but personally I don't find myself using anything more than /get and /merge all that often. The 14th command is probably one you've seen used before because it's /scoreboard, and this is also pretty complicated, but it's useful for minigames and servers. The first thing you should do is go to /scoreboard's objectives, add, and then you can type in the name of an objective. Let's just say score is my objective, and then I'll set this to dummy. If you change it to something along these lines, it'll show health of the player, and that'll automatically change whenever the player's score changes in that area. But dummy doesn't change anything, you have to change it manually using command blocks. Then you can do /scoreboard, objectives, set display, and then usually sidebar is most commonly used. There are a few other ones too. Then set this to score, and then once somebody's score changes, it'll show up on the side. If I do /scoreboard players add @s score 1, that'll increase my score by 1, and then the sidebar will show up. Back to objectives, you can use /objectives list to get a list of all of the scoreboards that are currently active. I can't figure out what modify does, and it doesn't seem that useful, so the last one is remove, which removes a score, which I'm not going to do right now because I need to keep demonstrating. If we go back to players, I can add a certain player, so let's select myself, score 1, and you'll see it increase by 1. If I instead go to set myself to a score of 1, you'll see it decrease to 1. I can set it to 50, and it'll change directly to that. Remove obviously does the opposite of add, it just takes 1 away from my score, or I can remove by 5, or whatever number I want. Scoreboard players list lets you grab every objective for a certain player, so it'll show that I have 1 score, which is score. If I use get, it'll show only a specific one. I have 36 score. And if I use reset, I can set mine not to 0 but to null, so it won't show up. The scoreboard player's enable command interacts with the /trigger command, which we haven't gone over yet, and the operation command lets you change and modify 2 entities' scores in ways that I don't have time to go over here. You can check out the wiki if you want more information on this, but I don't find myself using these features as often, and I want to make this guide as useful as possible. The /Tellraw command is the last command I want to go over, and luckily for you, it's a bit easier than the other ones. You just have a target selector. In this case, I'll use @a. You may have noticed with the other commands that I can use /say to say something, but it says it differently than if I actually type it, and you can use the /Tellraw command to get around this. If I use /Tellraw @a, it'll send a message to everybody, and then I have to use curly braces, and in quotes, put text, and then a colon, and then what I want to say. So in this case, I'll type in my username, and then it says that, and it shows up as my text, but I have this mod that shows my face. Since it's not actually me sending it, it looks different, but to vanilla players, to you, it will look the same as everything else. There are a few other tags I can add, namely color. You have to put it in quotes as well, and then I can set it to something like red, and it'll change this to red. I can also make my text bold by specifying bold in quotation marks, a colon, and then this time true without quotation marks. I can also italicize my text by adding a comma, quotations, italic, and then true, again with no quotation marks. That'll make it italicized, bold, have my text, and be read. You can combine these in a number of different ways. In this case, I've set my text to say Herobrine joined the game, and my color to yellow, which makes it look like Herobrine joined the game. I can also separate my text into two different colors by putting them in separate curly braces, connecting them by a comma, and surrounding them in score braces. Thanks for watching. Sorry if the video was janky, and feel free to leave a comment if you have any other questions, since I read all of them.